Alright, quick disclaimer before I start the guide here is that the Spiral Abyss is always changing. There's always going to be different enemies, different layouts, different debuffs, different buffs. So I tried to make this video, at least the tips in this video, as generic as possible. That being said, we'll start with tip number one, which is the buff cards in the Spiral Abyss. There's two things you need to know about them. One is that they can stack. So for the very basic example here is that there's a 20% increased attack buff card that you get at the start of each chamber. So by chamber 3, you could theoretically, and if you were really lucky, get 60% increased attack by chamber 3, and that's for both teams. All your characters get affected by this. The second thing you need to know about these cards is that they change daily. So every time you get, your new set of dailies and everything resets, you can check the Spiral Abyss to see if you got a more useful card buff for your team. So for example, let's say you got the 25% increased physical damage card, but you don't really use physical damage in your team comp. Hopefully, on your next reset, you'll get something like Elemental Burst, crit damage, crit rate, Elemental Mastery, or the attack, as I mentioned earlier. So, it does pay off to do your Spiral early so that you can try to re-roll for better buff cards if you're getting really, really bad ones, or ones that don't benefit you at all. Moving on to number 2 is cleansing the debuff. So around floor 11, there is usually some sort of debuff that affects you the entire floor. In this specific Spiral Abyss, at the time of recording, we have the Slowing Waters debuff, which makes all your cooldowns basically doubled. Certain characters can remove this buff, but basically you need to do an elemental reaction on yourself to cleanse it. So easy ways to do this are Bennett's Q. Anyone standing inside his ultimate circle will get the debuff cleansed, so your cooldowns for this particular debuff will be normal. Other characters that can do it are Diona, because she has an elemental shield that she applies to her applies to herself. Another good cleanser would have been Barbara. I would have mentioned her, but because the debuff is water and Barbara is hydro element, a hydro element cannot cleanse a hydro debuff, if that makes sense. So if there were any other debuff, then Barbara would also work. Her E skill would work here, but that is not the case in the Spiral Abyss, so unfortunately she is not useful here as a cleanser, at least. So yeah, keep that in mind. You can cleanse the debuff and then go to spamming your elemental skills or elemental burst or whatever without having to worry about those increased cooldowns. Number 3, shield breaking. This can be annoying and tricky, especially with the Fat 2E enemies. Memorizing what elements you need to break certain shields. But luckily, we have a visual reference here. Credit to the maker of this image, Reddit user RoboZinho. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I'll put the name in the description. But yeah, easy reference guide so you can plan ahead when you're looking at the chambers for what elements you need to bring to have an easier time breaking shields. This also applies to the lectors in the current Spiral Abyss. Again, this could change in the future. Also, you don't need high damage to break shields. Damage does not matter, so you can bring a weak support. For example, I use Diona's charged ice shots to get rid of certain shields. It's easier. Again, you don't need the damage, you just need to do hits. Her charge shot, her projectiles from her E also count. So just bring a certain element. You can even, like, if you need someone for fire damage and you need fire damage to break a certain shield, then you can bring like even Amber. Amber's charge shot will be a good option for that. All right, final tip number 4. This is pretty standard advice, but just try to focus on beating the Spiral Abyss first normally, and then try to 3-star it after. This will help you like understand what types of teams you need to bring for certain chambers. But also what I like to do is just build the 2 team comps I need to try to 3-star a certain chamber and try to do it one at a time. So for example, I'll use floor 12 as an example. Floor 12, in the current iteration of Spiral Abyss, in chamber 2, the second half, there is a bunch of the ocean mimics or the oceanid ads, and Ganyu is a perfect character. She's my main DPS, and she's a perfect character for constantly freezing those glass cannon fucks. But however, on chamber 3, first half is the lectors. Those are the electric dudes, and you need a good ice cryo character to constantly damage their shields once they get to a certain point. And she's good for that as well because the AoE can affect both of the lectors if they're in close proximity, of course, and her ult. So unfortunately, those oceanid mimics I mentioned are on chamber 2, whereas the lectors are on chamber 1, first half in chamber 3, excuse me. So what I'm basically trying to say is you're gonna have to do multiple runs. I know it'd be nice if you did, you know, in one run 3-starred all the chambers, but unless you're a whale, and if you are already 3-starring all this Spiral Abyss, you don't need this video at all, then you know, then lucky you. Basically just experiment with your teams, move them around, try to focus on 3-starring one chamber at a time, instead of trying to 3-star multiple. It's a lot easier and a lot less headache when trying to theory craft a team comp. Bonus tip, I guess, well, final tip would be if you're completely new to the Spiral Abyss and you're trying to find out some characters that will help you get started, I have 4 that I recommend, and the first one is going to be Benett, 4-star character. I'm sure a lot of you have pulled the Benett in your standard pulls, your limited banner pulls. He's a very common character that I'm sure everyone has, as long as you've been playing for a while. His ult does 3 things, as I mentioned in tip number 2. It cleanses the debuff, unless it's a fire debuff in the future. It will not cleanse that. He's also good at being a elemental burst battery for your pyro DPS characters, and his ult will also constantly heal you and give you a damage boost. So literally you can't go wrong with Benett in any team. Very easy character to build as well. You just need energy recharge and HP, I guess, if you really want, on his artifacts. It's very easy character to acquire and build, so that's why I recommend him. The second character is going to be kind of a surprise to some of you, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend Amber for a certain amount of reasons here. One, her bunny is a taunt. That taunt, in my opinion, is a very underrated mechanic, and a lot of people do not use it often, or at least beneficially as they should. The taunt is a great mechanic because it'll pull all the mobs within the bunny to attack it, giving you some breathing room or time to get away if you're getting swamped by all the mobs and you need to like make some distance or whatever. Great for that. Since she's also a pyro, if you're trying to build a team comp, she can give you pyro resonance, which is a 15% attack bonus. So if your main, you know, if you Dillic mains, Hu Tao mains need an extra boost in your damage, right there, easy. And then we've mentioned before, for shields, her charge attack and her elemental burst can be really good at bursting down those ice shields. Next character I'm gonna recommend is Diona. She was free in the first event in 1.5, so if you picked her up, she is another great choice in the Spiral Abyss because, once again, shield cleanses. She has an ice shield that cleanses the debuff in this Spiral Abyss. She's also a great healer, easy to build. Once again, all you need is energy recharge And if you give her more HP, so those shitty HP percent artifacts you've been getting, she can take advantage of them and increases the effectiveness of her shield. Doesn't require, you know, any 5-star fancy weapons. She can do really well with just a 4-star. And again, because of her ice damage and her projectiles, she's really, really good at both the Abyss Heralds and the Abyss Lectors at taking down their shields. Especially on the Heralds, she can constantly freeze them as well, since they're Hydro. Really good character, just in general, and in the Spiral Abyss, especially this one. So recommend building her. And the last character I will recommend is Sucrose. Sucrose is, I guess, a lot of people like to call her your budget venti. If you weren't lucky enough to pull him in the original banner or the rerun. But Sucrose is also good because she gives part of her elemental mastery to her team when you ult. And since she's all about chemical reactions, of course you're gonna have some sort of, well, hopefully you have some sort of elemental element type to mix with her ult and do big damage, and her ult sucks in enemies, which is great. I also recommend Sucrose because Elemental Mastery is getting a buff in 1.6. For those that are unaware, she's going to be a really solid choice. Good character to have around, and keep in mind you can suck the mages when their shields are down. You can suck the fire agents as well in her ult, and the annoying Whopper flowers in floor 12 can all be sucked with her ult, and you can constantly proc elemental reactions on them for big damage. And also, again, another character that's easy to build and easy to acquire because all the characters that I mentioned are 4-star. Amber is, of course, a free character that you get in the story. And all you want on her is elemental mastery and then elemental recharge, so that you can constantly keep spamming your skills with Sucrose. That's all you need. She's good to go. But yeah, those are my good support characters that I always recommend for a lot of people starting out in the Spiral Abyss. I still use most of these characters. Anyways, that is gonna do it for this small tip guide thing video for the Spiral Abyss. Hopefully it was helpful to somebody. If you have any tips of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try to make more videos that are related to Genshin Impact in the future. Other than that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.